everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masachet Ketubot. This week is our 11th class, and we are going to be reviewing Daf 70 to Daf 76. Um, okay, we are a little bit down on Daf 70. We are beginning a new chapter, and this chapter really discusses the power of speech. And I think it's very appropriate that we're learning this right before Rosh Hashanah, right before Yom Kippur, where we say Kol Nidre. It's really important to understand that according to Judaism, what we say is very powerful. Right? We've seen this before when we discussed the fact that one can, with one's words, make something kadosh, make something holy. We can betroth a person, get married. It's very important to understand the weight of words. And this chapter begins with the concept of vows. Um, and in Judaism, in especially the Torah, and then the Gemara, the Mishnah, and the Gemara, take vows very seriously. Which is why whenever I hear young kids say, "I swear to you," right? Or I heard this week someone say, "I swear to God." Don't do that, right? We don't do that. You can say, and that's really why I think that there are some people who say bli neder, right? I'll see you tomorrow, bli neder, meaning I'm not vowing that I will see you tomorrow because that um, is a commitment. Rather, I hope to see you tomorrow, and I'll try my very best. I'm not taking a vow. And therefore, the Mishnah on Daf 70 tells us that if a man takes a vow that his wife cannot benefit from his food, um, so we need to take this very seriously. And therefore, if he says, for the next 30 days, so then he needs to appoint a trustee. In the Mishnah, he's called a parnas. Like lefarnes is someone who um, supports someone, right? Parnasa in Hebrew means your livelihood. So he has to appoint a trustee who's going to support his wife, because again, he has a responsibility to support his wife, but but he cannot now use his own funds. And therefore, he has to figure out a way to kind of get the funds to her. If he takes it for more than 30 days, he actually needs to divorce his wife and give her a Ketuva. So again, very powerful, right? You could say, what's the big deal? So he'll figure out a way. And the Mishnah says no. If a man is taking a vow to not basically to not be able to directly support his wife, that means there's something wrong with this marriage. They should not be married, and therefore they need to get divorced. Um, okay. Um, Okay, the Mishnah then says, again, we mentioned the idea of 30 days. The Mishnah says, well, maybe if the person is a regular Jewish person, so if it's 1 month, okay. If it's 2 months, then he needs to get divorced. If it's a Kohen, again, to remind us, a priest, a Kohen, once he divorces his wife, they could not get back together ever. Right? A regular person, if they get divorced, as long as she has not married someone in the middle, in between, let's say they get divorced and, a year later he decides, oh no, I want to get back together, they can get together. They can get back together, but for a Kohen, they cannot. And therefore, the Mishnah says, let's give them a little bit of time, right? Maybe they're in a big fight. Maybe they need therapy, right? Let's wait and see. So the Mishnah says if it's a Kohen, so if he takes a vow for 2 months, that's okay. 3 months, no. Then um, they need to get divorced. What if she says, I take a vow, I'm never going to eat apples. And it's important to understand, we'll actually do this in the next Masechet. When a married woman takes a vow, her husband has the ability to annul the vow. We'll see in a little bit that there are conditions to this. But if he does not annul the vow, meaning he hears about it and he doesn't say anything, then the vow takes effect. So if she says, I don't want to eat apples, and he upholds the vow, he actually has to divorce her. Again, we're going to see in the Gemara why that is. Um, and again, this idea of maybe give more time if it's a Kohen. What if she takes a vow that she's not going to use any perfume, right, or deodorant, and he doesn't say anything? Again, they have to get divorced. Um, or maybe there's a distinction between poor women versus rich women, and that's the end of the Mishnah. So the Gemara now says, um, first of all, as we mentioned in the beginning, a husband has the responsibility to take care of his wife. So how is the Mishnah allowing him to get rid of that responsibility, right? If he's supposed to support her, how can he take a vow that he's not going to support her, right? He doesn't have he can't do that. Um, so the Gemara explains that basically he can say to her, right, and we have seen this before. He can say, you know what, you keep your earnings, right? Let's say she's a lawyer. He says to her, you keep your salary, and I'm not going to support you. And then now he can forbid her from benefiting from him because he's not really supporting her. Or the Gemara says maybe he says that and then he forbids her from his things, right? Because again, as long as um, as long as he doesn't have an obligation to her, he could take that vow. We said that he has to appoint this trustee who is going to support her. Um, Again, here we said if she's making a lot of money, so she's fine. But he needs to make sure that if she's not making enough money to support herself, that there is somebody who's going to take care of her and that she will be supported. It seems that why is there a difference 30 days, 31 days? Why does it matter? Interestingly, the Gemara says, after 30 days, people are going to hear about it, and then she's going to get embarrassed, and therefore they have to resolve it within that month. Um, excuse me, or maybe the issue is that he actually, remember we said if they're married and he has to support her, he can't really take that vow. So the Gemara says maybe he took the vow when they were just engaged. At that moment, he doesn't have an obligation to support her, and that's how he could take the vow. But then they got married, and now he needs to support her, so he has to figure out how to do it. Um, Okay. Um, the the um, the Gemara explains that this trustee, this parnas, is not seen as a messenger of the husband, because if that would be the case, we have this concept in the Gemara that a messenger, right? If I send someone to do something for me, it's as if I'm doing it, right? The person is an extension of me, and therefore the Gemara says it's important to understand that this parnas, he isn't an extension of the person, because then that wouldn't work. Rather, he's doing it on his own, right? And he basically, the husband says, right, I will reward whoever will do the following thing, right? He doesn't appoint him, the person volunteers to do it. Um, Now, since we're talking about vows, the Gemara explains that if a person takes a vow to not have any benefit from another person, right? Let's say he says, either I'm in a fight with some person or they do so much for me, so I don't have any benefit from my neighbor. But then the person ends up not having enough food to eat, and the neighbor wants to give him food. So the Gemara explains how can he do it. So he can say, oh, you go down to the local grocery store where the Gemara explains where the person, the owner knows who you are, and you say, you know what, I'm giving this money, and kind of put it on his tab, right? Pay up his tab or give him a tab, right? And this way, the other person will receive food from this grocery store. So it's an indirect way of being able to support this person. Um, what happens if the two people are traveling together? There's no storekeeper in the middle. So the Gemara says you can give it to a third party, and then the third party can give it to the person that you again um, took a vow to not, benefit from his things. Okay, Daf 71. Um, if the husband, again, as we mentioned, specifies that 1 month, so then he appoints the parnas. But if he doesn't specify any time, then he actually needs to divorce her right away. Or another option is they stay married because maybe he'll figure out a way to annul the vow. So just also important to understand how vows work. If a person takes a vow, it is binding, but they could go to a rabbi, a sage, and explain, if I basically the explanation would be, if I would have known X, I never would have taken this vow, right? And that's a way of annulling the vow. It's important to understand that a person cannot annul their own vow. They need to do it with a sage or a rabbi. And this is actually, again, perfect that we're doing this. There is a custom before Rosh Hashanah that people do what's called Hatarat Nedarim, where they do a ceremony to annul any vows that they may have taken over the year. And it's generally done in front of a court. Why do I put quotation? Because it means a beit din. Basically, three men sit at a table, and the people stand before them, and they read from the liturgy, meaning there is a text that's called Hatarat Nedarim, and basically you say all the vows that I took this year, I didn't mean them, and I want them to be annulled. And this is a way of annulling your vows before you enter Rosh Hashanah, the new year. And if you didn't, again, if you didn't do this, then you have Yom Kippur, where the first prayer, right, the first tefillah that we have on Yom Kippur is Kol Nidre, right? All the Nidarim, all the vows that I've taken should be annulled, right? That's what we're asking God for. But excuse me, generally we ask the Beit Din, right? We ask the court of three people to annul our vows. So it's very fitting that we're discussing this, and I encourage everybody to do that. Men and women can do Hatarat Nadarim. Okay. Um, Ah, so then, if you remember, the Mishnah said if the woman took a vow, let's say to not eat apples, he can annul the vow, or they need to get divorced. And I imagine many of you are saying, why is that such a big deal? So she doesn't eat apples. So the Gemara actually answers that that's not exactly the case. Rather, the case is that she took a vow to not eat a certain fruit, and if she does accidentally or on purpose eat the fruit, then she can't have relations with her husband. Now, all of a sudden, it's something that involves the husband, and therefore, right, again, if he doesn't annul that vow, now we see something is wrong with this relationship. Zohar is asking if a husband can do Hatarat Nedarim for his wife. He can. Yes. Again, in the Jewish law, in halacha, we have this concept of ishto kegufo, right? A husband and wife are like one body, and it's really, philosophical, emotional, spiritual, but also legal in the sense that, yes, a husband can do Hatarat Nedarim for his wife, though a wife can do it as well. So excellent question. Okay, the same thing. The Gemara continues on 71. If a woman takes a vow to become a Nazir, a Nazarite, so again, the husband can annul the vow, or he can say, I don't want to have a wife who takes vows. Right, someone who is very free and takes vows, and therefore he can actually divorce her without giving her the ketuva because he didn't realize she was this type of person. Or the Gemara says no, she does get her ketuva if they get divorced. Okay. The husband, as we mentioned, a husband can annul the wife's vow only if, and here is the important, I think a very important part, only if it involves self-denial, right? What we call in Hebrew inui nefesh, right? Something that she's denying herself. Let's say bathing, perfume, or she takes a vow, right? I'm not going to eat meat. I'm not going to drink wine. Or, right, so again, he doesn't want her to suffer, so he can annul that vow. Or if it's something that affects him directly, again, as I mentioned, having relations, right? If she says, I'm not going to have relations with you, that is problematic, right, or something that will affect their physical relationship. So then he has the right to annul that vow. Um, Ah, so here the Gemara says, if he took the vow, right, when he was angry, so the Gemara says, oh, maybe he'll calm down, and therefore we give him a month. But if she takes the vow, and he didn't annul it, so now she thinks, oh my gosh, he definitely hates me, right? Why didn't he annul that vow? And therefore, she will decide that she wants to get divorced immediately. So I think just fascinating the psychology behind when someone, right, when one spouse takes a vow, what are they actually thinking, right? Heat of the moment, or is it more um, I don't want to use the word conniving, but maybe there's more behind it, right? Oh, I'll do this. I'll see what he says, and if he doesn't say the right thing, it must be that he hates me, and we're going to get divorced. Um, okay, the next Mishnah tells us that if the husband vows that the wife can't visit her father when he is in town, so again, it's important to understand many times. Right? The girl grows up in her house, she marries the husband, and she goes to wherever the husband lives. That could be across the street, it could be across town, and it could also be in another country, right? Women always generally followed their husbands. So if the father was in town, so the Gemara says it's okay for him to tell her not to visit her father for a month, but not for 2 months. This seems to be too controlling. And again, I keep saying very interesting, but I think that, as I've mentioned previously, the Gemara, I think, is extremely advanced for its time. Right? Basically, the Gemara is saying these are red flags. Right? If someone is taking a vow, if someone is not letting his wife go visit her family, right? They talk about how, abusive relationships entail isolation, right? So if he says you can't go see your family, that's a red flag. So the Mishnah is saying, not good, right? This is not a good thing. She needs to divorce him. If the father is in a different city, so he can say, you can't see him till the first holiday. But if he says you can't see him for the whole year, right, basically 3 holidays, not okay. They need to get divorced. If a husband vows that a wife can't go to funerals or weddings, they need to get divorced immediately. Again, it seems that the Mishnah really says, right, he's locking her up. He's preventing her from socializing, and this is bad, right? Bad news, red flags. If he gives a specific reason, maybe it's okay. If he makes a vow that's conditional, again, that could lead in divorce. So now the Gemara is going to explain all of these things. Um, um, Here, the Gemara talks about the two Hebrew words for husband. There is ishi, right, my husband, and then there's ba'ali, like almost like Baal, like my master, right? Even though nowadays people use both interchangeably, but the Gemara explains how, right, ba'ali is a little bit more controlling, whereas Ishi is more of a healthy relationships. Um, Daf 72 talks about the vows that you can't go to weddings. So we understand that they would need to get divorced, but why a funeral? Like, why is it so important for her to go to a funeral? And the Gemara explains that if she doesn't go to funerals, then people are not going to go to her funeral, right? People are going to say, right, you didn't go to everybody else, so why should we come to you, right? Or they might not eulogize her. So that's why it is very important, again, to go to weddings and funerals. Um, what if the husband says to her, I want you to tell my friend this extremely embarrassing or intimate statement, um, and then I'll annul your vow? Again, they need to get divorced. And again, red flag, control, not good. Get out of this relationship. If he told her that she needs to prevent herself from getting pregnant, which I guess if she doesn't want to do that, or he makes her do pointless work. Again, they need to get divorced. If it's something that that they are not that she doesn't agree with. Wait, Lynn writes. Nice. Writing the difference between Ba'ali and Ishi. Yes, exactly. It's not supposed to be servitude. It's supposed to be a healthy relationship. Okay. The next Mishnah tells us a woman who, the following women forfeit getting their Ketuva. Again, remember, we are in Masechet Ketubot, and we said every woman gets a Ketuva. So the Mishnah tells us that if a woman does certain actions, she will actually forfeit her right to the Ketuva. What is that? If she doesn't keep Jewish law, right? Dat Moshe. If she doesn't keep Jewish law, if let's say if the husband is observant and he married an observant woman, and then she decides to not be observant, that seems to be problematic in terms of the relationship. Um, Also, if she doesn't keep uh, Jewish customs, this is called Dat Yehudit. So again, there's two laws that we're mentioning. Dat Moshe are the actual laws. Dat Yehudit are customs that are customary in that area, in the time, and the Gemara is going to explain what all of these things are. The Mishnah explains what these things are, right? So if she doesn't keep Nida, right, family purity, if she doesn't separate Chala, if she doesn't keep her vows, if she doesn't separate the tithes, then, and again, all of these things affect him as well, right? I would imagine if it was she decides to, I don't know, transgress Shabbat in her bedroom, I don't know if it would matter, right? It doesn't affect him directly, but here these are things that affect him directly. What is dat Yehudit? What are customs? So the Mishnah says if she does not cover her hair, this is one of the sources that covering a woman who is married should cover her hair. This is one of the sources for it. Or if she spins wool in public, the Gemara will explain why, or that she speaks to many different men, right? I guess we would say she is flirtatious, maybe. If she curses his parents in front of him, or if she's very loud, and the Gemara is going to explain what this means. But all of these things are grounds for her to lose her Ketuva. So the Gemara explains. Right, let's say, what does it mean that she doesn't take maaser? That basically he says to her, "Did you do this?" And she says, "Yes, yes, yes, of course," but she doesn't. Right, so meaning if she's lying to him about what she's observing and what she isn't observing, so then she loses the Ketuva. Again, the same thing with family purity. He asks her, what's going on? She says, "Oh, I asked the rabbi. He told me everything is fine." Again, if she's lying about what she's keeping, she loses her Ketuva. If he doesn't know if he knows that she doesn't keep vows, so then again he can divorce her without a Ketuva. Um, Interesting. Lynn is asking, does a divorced woman continue to cover her hair as just seeming to look right for a mature woman? It is an excellent question. According to Jewish law, a divorced woman does continue covering her hair. However, if she is in the market and wants to get married again, she can actually uncover her hair in order to go dating and meet somebody. So, yes, excellent question. Okay. Again, and now here is one of the sugiot, one of the sources for hair covering. Yes, thank you, Zohar. Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote a tshuva, wrote a responsa about this as well. And here the Gemara explains, wait a minute, you just said that covering your hair is dat Yehudit. It's a custom, but the Gemara here tells us, but we know that it's actually a biblical law. It's based on a verse in the Torah, and therefore, what do you mean that it's a custom? And here you see the Gemara says that there are two levels of covering your hair. One would be what's called a kalta. The word kalta means basket in Aramaic, and basically it seems right when you see the women, in Africa who have like a basket on their heads to carry, their apples to market. So that basket covers their head. It doesn't necessarily cover all their hair, right? If it's a basket, you can see through. So the Gemara seems to say that kalta, that basket, would be sufficient on a biblical level, but covering all of your hair would be on a rabbinic level. Or maybe it's talking about not how you're covering it, but where you're covering it, right? Not needing to cover your hair, needing to cover your hair in very public places is biblical. Needing it to cover your hair in semi-private places, again, I don't mean in your house, but in your backyard, in your front yard, in your alleyway, that would be more rabbinic. So just it's important to understand that Daf 72 is one of the sources for hair covering. Next, the Gemara talks about spinning wool. What's the problem? The Gemara actually says that when you spin wool, you reveal your arms, and therefore it is not appropriate. It is immodest, or it's actually like a spindle, right? I always think of like the spindles, like the wheel. But here it could also mean like the spindle that you like just drop. And if she's dropping it maybe between her legs, the Gemara explains that maybe this is also calls attention to her private parts, and it can lead to flirtatious behavior, and it is not appropriate. We mentioned that if she's a loud woman, what does that mean? One option is that, again, like she screams and yells and everybody can hear her. Another option is that we're talking, again, if we're talking about appropriate behavior, maybe she's very loud during relations. Again, there's nothing wrong with being verbal, but I think it's, if the neighbors can hear, that would be problematic. Okay, next Mishnah. If a man betroths a woman, and says, right, I betroth you as long as you don't have any vows, right? You didn't take any vows. And then it turns out that she did take a vow before they were engaged. So then it annuls the engagement. They are not engaged anymore. Again, I'm using the word engaged, but mikudeshet, what we used before, betrothed. If, let's say, he didn't say anything, right? He just proposes, and then he finds out that she has vows. He can divorce her without a ketuva, but he doesn't have to, right? Because that was not a stipulation that he made beforehand. If he betroths her and says, as long as you don't have any blemishes on you, again, they, you know, okay, we'll get there. Right, so he says, I betroth you as long as you don't have any blemishes, and then it turns out that she does. So then again, it annuls the engagement. They are not engaged. But if he didn't say anything, he could get divorced without a ketuva because he can say, I didn't sign up for this, let's say. And we'll talk about what we're saying here in a minute. So the Gemara says, there are different types of vows, right? Again, no meat, wine, colorful clothing. Again, if he finds out that it's these types of vows, again, he can divorce her without a ketuva. Let's see, he says, I'm going to betroth you as long as you don't have any vows. And then they just get married. And when they get married, he doesn't say, now I'm marrying you and make sure you don't have any vows. The question is, does that marriage also have the same condition? So the Gemara says, no, it's considered a valid marriage, and she needs a get if she wants to get out of that marriage. Daf 73, maybe he uprooted his original condition when they got married and he didn't say anything, or or it's still there and we are unsure. Okay. Here the Gemara now splits it and says maybe we're talking about two different women, right? A man betroths Leah, and he says to her, I will betroth you as long as you do not have any vows. And then he just goes and he marries Rachel. So, and he doesn't say anything. So we say, does he, did he mean to have that stipulation for Rachel as well? Or do we say it's two different people, and therefore, we're not sure what that relationship is like? Okay. The Gemara continues that if a man betroths a woman by accident, we'll discuss what that means, or with less than a pruta, meaning he betroths her with less money than is allowed, right? You have to betroth the woman with what's called a pruta, whatever it is, $1, and he gave her 10 cents. So the Gemara says that is not considered a valid betrothal, and it's annulled. Okay, what is by accident? So the Gemara says, oh, really, by accident means with less than a pruta, meaning that, again, he betrothed with 10 cents instead of using $1 or whatever. I'm not sure exactly what the exact value is. And then here, the Gemara talks about a minor who is married off by her father, right? He has the right to do that. And then let's say she gets divorced. And then she remarries, she gets remarried again. And then he dies. So the Gemara says that she only does chalitza, not yibum, because at that time when she got remarried, if she was still a minor, that marriage is only rabbinic and not biblical in nature. But if she was an adult, so then she can do yibum or chalitza. Okay, Daf 74 goes back to, I'll just say it quickly, we've saw it before, that if there's a mistaken chalitza it works. And the Gemara asks, what's mystique in chalitza? Remember, we said if we tell somebody, oh, do chalitza and we'll give you $20, and then he does chalitza, you could be like, yeah, just kidding, I'm not giving you $20. Remember, we said we can actually not coerce, but kind of trick the brother to do chalitza. Since we're talking about vows, the Gemara discusses what are vows. How do we understand vows? We actually learn it from the Torah, from the two tribes of Reuven and Gad. If you remember, they wanted the land on the other side of the Jordan River, and they went to Moshe and they asked if they can stay. And basically, Moshe says to them, you can stay on condition that you go and you fight for your brethren in Israel. And if you don't, so then you can't have this land. So this double language of, if I will do it, X, and if I won't, then Y. So we learn that actually from these two tribes, and therefore we also learn from them that it has to be something that can be done through a messenger, and therefore that can work with a condition, but if not, then it doesn't work. Okay. 1 second. Okay. So now we're going to discuss the difference between we mentioned if she has vows versus if she has blemishes. And it seems that, again, vows can be annulled, so maybe that's less severe. But as we know, maybe some blemishes can heal. And the Gemara talks about this idea of if he wants her to annul her vows, there's a sense of embarrassment, right? She has to go to court. She has to explain to everybody what the vow was, and then has to get it annulled. And it's a machloket if the husband cares if his wife is embarrassed in court or not. And therefore he can say, right, I don't want to be married to a woman who takes vows. If a man divorced his wife because of a vow or because of a shemra, right? He thought that she was acted inappropriately. So then she cannot then remarry him, right? Meaning once again, like if everybody knew about it, so then she cannot remarry him. But if they didn't know about it, then she actually can remarry him. Daf 75. Again, we're talking about vows. So the flip side is a vow that is in Sefer Yehoshua. The group of people known as the Givonim. They were a nationality, a group of people that lived in Israel. They were very scared that Joshua was going to conquer them, and kill them all. So basically, they tricked Yehoshua and they said, "We come from very far away. Please give us basically like amnesty." And he says, "Of course, I swear I would never harm you." And then it turns out that they live, down the block, and he basically is tricked into upholding that vow. And the Gemara explains on Daf 75 that this was a very public vow, and therefore he could not annul the vow, right? Everybody heard it, and therefore this is the source that if you have a public vow made in front of 10 people, you cannot annul that vow. As I mentioned in the beginning, if you take a vow, the only way to annul it is through a sage. And if that's the type of vow she took, so then she can't remarry her husband if they got divorced, right? Meaning it's something that's so severe that they need a sage to annul it. And here is a very famous line in the Gemara. So the Gemara basically says that women, and we have seen this, I think, previously, women prefer to be married. They are less picky about their husbands. And therefore, again, remember, we're talking about the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, where women needed protection. The only real way to be protected was with a husband. And therefore, the women will be less picky. The husbands, on the other hand, might be a little bit more picky. So now let's talk about, speaking about being picky, these blemishes. Remember, we said a husband can say, "I don't want to marry. I will marry you as long as you don't have any blemishes." Um, so, what are these blemishes? So the Gemara explains that these blemishes are things that invalidate a kohen, a priest, from doing work in the temple. So we have seen that before, and it adds a few other, I don't know if we would call them blemishes, but maybe we can call them physical characteristics. So the Gemara talks about if a woman is extremely sweaty, if she has a mole, body odor, different things like that. Those would count as blemishes. What if she has a scar? Same thing. Or if she has a very deep voice, that can be seen as a mum, as a blemish. However, right, again, if he spoke to her beforehand, he cannot claim a year later, "Oh, I can't believe I didn't know you have a deep voice." Right? So as long as he knew about it, and we'll see that in the next Mishnah, he cannot claim that this was a marriage under false pretenses. Here, there's a whole discussion about women's breasts and how they could be, I guess, seen as blemishes, different sizes and different shapes. There's a story about an Arab woman who slung, her breast over to her back and nursed her baby. I don't know. I'm just telling you what's there. Okay, next Mishnah. The next Mishnah tells us that if she does have a blemish, so if, okay, here's the case. After Kiddushin, right, they were already betrothed, but they didn't get married yet. So she's still married, she's still living in her father's house. So then, again, here's the case, right? The husband says, "I don't want to marry you if you have any blemishes." And now, lo and behold, a week before the wedding, there is a blemish. So the father needs to prove that the blemish was there. Wait, sorry, one second. Okay. The father needs to prove that the husband, um, that two options, either that it developed after they already got engaged, and therefore he was engaged already, and at the time of the engagement she didn't have the blemish, therefore this is valid, or that it was there already, and he must have seen it, and therefore he must have accepted it, and therefore he gets the Ketuva money. If they were already married, so then the husband needs to prove that it was there before they were betrothed, and his betrothal is now annulled because it was there before they were betrothed. The sages say that if this blemish was hidden, so then that's the case. But if it's very visible, right, if she has a very big mole on her face and they went on 2 dates, where there was light, he can't now claim, again, a year later, "Oh my God, I can't believe she has a mole," right? He saw her, he married her, that's it, right? So he can't claim anything if it's already public. Okay, so the Gemara talks about, again, the concept of chazaka. Chazaka is the how do we define? Hold on. The presumption, right? So we say the chazaka is that most people do not have blemishes, and therefore we assume that she didn't have a blemish beforehand, and only now does she have this blemish. And then there's a machloket who needs to bring the proof, right? The father or the husband. And the Gemara says that basically, how do we determine who needs to bring proof? It depends when you found it and where the woman was when you found it. Meaning, if she's already married and living with the husband, so then the husband needs to prove that it was there beforehand. If the woman, if the woman is still living in her father's house, so now her father is the one who has to bring the proof. Um, Also, as I mentioned, there's a chazaka, there's an understanding that a man is going to check out his girlfriend before he proposes. And therefore, the father can say, look, you saw her, you went on those 3 dates already, so therefore you can't claim that this is a invalid engagement. Daf 76 tells us that, again, the beginning of the Mishnah, the first case, she says, right, you owe my father. That's why the father needs to find proof. At the end of the Mishnah, she says, you owe me, right? And now the husband needs to prove that it was there beforehand. And here the Gemara says, right, what kind of blemish, right? If a blemish is that she has 6 fingers, it's obvious that it did not develop yesterday or last week or last month. And therefore, it's obvious that the father needs to prove that the husband saw it beforehand and that he was okay with it. And therefore, the father wants the Ketuva money. From here, the Gemara goes on again, one could say a tangent, or one can say a parallel case. The parallel case is about, again, it doesn't, the characters are not parallel. What's parallel here is that we're making a transaction. There are 2 people involved, and there are things that are in one domain and things that are in another domain. So what's the case? There are 2 people, Reuven and Shimon, right? Reuven owns a donkey and Shimon owns a cow. And Reuven walks by Shimon's house and he sees a beautiful cow and he says, hey, you know what? Let's barter, right? You give me your cow, I'll give you my donkey that's in my house. So Shimon says yes. Reuven pulls the donkey. We're going to learn that when you acquire something, one way to acquire it is by pulling it, mishicha. If you pull that animal, it now becomes Reuven. And then all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, Reuven's son comes and says, oh my God, Abba, guess what? The donkey died. So now the question is, whose donkey is it, right? Meaning, if the transaction already occurred and then the donkey died, so then Shimon is out of luck. He basically, bought a donkey and a minute later it died. But maybe, right, if the donkey dies before the transaction, so then the transaction isn't a valid transaction. So the Gemara tells us that Reuven needs to prove that the donkey died after the transaction, and therefore, so sorry, Shimon, you lost the donkey. So the Gemara says, so too with a bride. Again, not that the bride is a donkey or a cow, rather that there's this transaction, and then the question is, who has the burden of proof, the father or the husband? And then there's a whole discussion about what does it mean when they have the burden of proof, right? Is it that they have to prove it in order to keep their money, right? So Reuven wants to keep the cow. The husband wants to keep the Ketuva money. So that would be a parallel case. But let's say the father wants to extract, right? He wants to take the Ketuva money. That would not be a parallel case. So the Gemara goes through a few different permutations in order to make the two cases be parallel. And here we have another case where a butcher buys a cow from the cowboy. I don't know, the person who's the cow herder. So he buys a cow, and then the butcher slaughters the cow, and he sees that the cow has a pin, a needle in its stomach, and that if it goes through the whole stomach, like through the lining, that would make it not a kosher animal. And now the question is, again, whose liability is it, right? So the butcher wants to say, hey, I thought I was buying a kosher cow. I didn't buy a kosher cow. I want my money back. And the seller can say, I sold you a kosher cow, and maybe the pin got stuck in the stomach, after you bought the cow. So who has to prove what? And here's a very famous line, very important fundamental principle. In Hebrew, we say, hamotzi michavero alav hara'aya. What does that mean? The person who wants to collect money is the person who has the burden of proof, right? The person who has the money already doesn't have to prove anything. He already has the money. The person who wants to get that money needs to bring the proof. So that's just a very important concept to understand. Obviously, right, the person who has the money already has the upper hand. And just to finish off the daf, the Mishnah had spoken about visible blemishes versus hidden blemishes, and the Gemara talks about here that if a woman has epilepsy, that could be seen as a hidden blemish, right? If it's something that she can hide, in the sense that if she knows when she's going to have an episode or a seizure, she goes to another room. So there is a possibility that he would have no idea that she has epilepsy. So that would be called a hidden blemish, and he could divorce her because if she did not tell him about this beforehand. But if she cannot control it, then it's considered a visible blemish because it's something that everybody could see. And if he didn't do enough research, so then we say, you should have done more research because everybody knows that so and so has this condition. So with that, we finish, at least for today, a discussion about blemishes, and that is it for today. Next Tuesday is Rosh Hashanah. I just realized as I got on here. So I think I'm just going to check with Web Yeshiva to see if we can have. I think what we'll do is have the shiur next Wednesday. So we'll keep it the same time, but we'll do it on Wednesday. And I think I'm going to have to start looking at the calendar to see when we're going to have shiurim in the next, I think, couple of weeks, because I imagine, right, I think the Chagim fall out Monday, Tuesday for everyone outside of Israel. So I will look into that, and I will make a new schedule. So Bezrat Hashem, maybe next week I'll already send the schedule for the month. So with that, I want to wish everyone a Shana Tova, a wonderful new year. As they say, Ketuva v'chatima tova. May you all be inscribed in the book of life, and really may we have the merit to continue our learning. Baruch Hashem, it's been a while, and may we continue together next year as well. So really wishing everyone a wonderful Rosh Hashanah, and Bezrat Hashem, see you in the new, as we used to say with kids, as kids, we used to say, see you next year. So see you all next year in year 5783. So wishing everyone a Shana Tova, a good week, and a Shabbat Shalom. Bye, everyone.